Please welcome to the stage Asheville Area Arts Council Executive Director, Katie Cornell.
Hi, everybody. Good morning and welcome to the 10th Annual Creative Sector Summit, the region's only creative industry specific conference. So the last 2 years, to say the least, have been a bit challenging. We have faced new and unexpected challenges. We've learned that we can do hard things, and we've learned we're not alone. I think the greatest silver lining of the past 20 months has been the ways in which it has brought us closer together, even if it was socially distanced. I think the thing I'm most proud of is the development of the Arts Coalition. The forming of these 10 committees is led by a powerhouse of leadership team is a huge step to unifying the creative sector, aligning our policy priorities, and working together for our mutual benefit. I want to thank our Arts Coalition members, especially the Arts Coalition chairs, for helping us get this initiative off the ground and encouraging you all to become, and I encourage you all to become involved. We want to hear from you. I also want to thank all our sponsors of this year's Creative Sector Summit, especially Explore Asheville, the City of Asheville, the Wortham Center for the Performing Arts, Rabbit Rabbit, Blue Spiral One, Craft Your Commerce, East Fork, and the Orange Peel. In your conference bags, you will find a yellow folder. Inside the yellow folder is a copy of the Creative Sector Earnings Infographic, which we'll get into more during this afternoon's panel. There's also a blank journal for you to take notes and a vaccine passport for you all with some stickers from the Arts Council. But most importantly, in here is your drink tickets for this afternoon's festivities. So make sure you hold on to this. Lastly, there's a copy of today's schedule. On the schedule, you will see instructions for joining Menti and the Wi-Fi today. Unlike most events in this space, we actually want you to have your phones out, but on silent mode. We want you all, both here in person and those of you joining us online, to be active participants in today's panels. So we'll be using this interactive presentation tool. You can go to menti.com on your phone or computer to participate. The meeting code is 1786-6021. So if you guys want to go ahead and join right now, I'll ask you your first question. While we're waiting, I want to wish a very happy birthday to Michelle Weitzman. Thank you for spending your birthday with us today. So once you enter the code, you'll see a screen asking you to enter a word that you feel best describes the Buncombe County creative sector. And as you enter these words, they will appear up here on this screen. Definitely passionate, definitely clever, resilient. Underappreciated, I feel you, yes. Dedicated. Necessary, for sure. Awesome. So is everybody getting the hang of it? Awesome. What I missed? Strong, vibrant. Okay, so we'll be asking, as I said, a lot more questions throughout the day, especially during the Q&A. This is how we'll do the Q&A at the end of the panels. All right. Our first panel today is on racial equity in the arts. Making real progress towards racial equity for the arts sector is going to take all of us working together. As defined by the Attaway Group in their Whiteness at Work series, racial equity within our organizations is the active process of identifying and eliminating racism and racial biases by changing systems, structures, policies, practices, and attitudes so that power and resources are redistributed and shared equitably. Please take a moment to share what steps you have taken to support racial equity, either within your organization or personally. While we're waiting. Many arts businesses are taking proactive steps to make changes within their organizations. But to really bring about changes that are needed, it is going to require more than just individual organizations. Today, the panel will discuss how we might work together to make real and lasting changes for the entire creative sector. Hiring, equity audits, maintaining a culture of inclusivity, strive to mix our participation days, board practices. These are good individual steps. Now, this discussion will be moderated by Stephanie Hickling Beckman. Stephanie is the Managing Artistic Director of Different Strokes Performing Arts Collective. She is also the chair of the Arts Coalition's Arts Equity Committee. Stephanie, you can come on out to the stage. Joining Stephanie today is Sekou Coleman, Executive Director of Asheville Writers in the Schools and Community. Lise Kloppel, Chair and Associate Professor of Drama at UNC Asheville. Jenny Pickens, freelance mixed media artist. And Micah Mackenzie, art entrepreneur and board member at Asheville Area Arts Council.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here for this very important discussion, and thank the panel members for taking their time to come and join us today. So over the last couple of years, we've been talking a lot about what racial equity in the arts looks like, especially in regard to when We See You White America came out, and a lot of artists band together to say which things had not been right in the arts industry for so long, and what we might do to make them better. So we look at Asheville, and we look at how Asheville has historically treated racial equity in the arts. And with this panel, we hope to get to the bottom of a lot of things that were going on. We're not going to hit all of it, of course, but we're going to try to get some of those important topics. So what I want to start out by doing is asking our esteemed panel members, what does racial equity in the local arts sector look like to you? And any one of you can go ahead and start.
Well, for me, arts equity looks like, I would hope one day for Asheville to be a vision of fairness, a vision of collaboration. It's definitely something that I've strived to see in Asheville. Going away to Philadelphia and coming back to Asheville and seeing, it was a minute change, but it was a change in itself. So I just hope to see a little bit more diversity in the art scene here. So that's what I'm looking forward to seeing.
Anyone else?
Also, being actual local person born and raised here, there's a lot can be done. I remember younger trying to get into art galleries or art studios or even to get my work seen. And because I was considered myself self-taught, there wasn't very many doors opening. And there wasn't a lot of people giving you advice like, okay, well, what can you do to make your product or your art better? You never got that kind of help to do anything. So thankfully, I was just the type of person who wanted to just, I'll use that no as a positive and a way to keep going, and got me to where I'm at today. So it definitely was a challenge.
Jenny, you and I have been here for quite a while. You, your whole life. I've only been here since '97, and I know what I've experienced. So when I look back at 20 plus years ago, I remember a time when I went on auditions and the director would say to me, you know, you were really great and we would love to cast you, but we can't match you on the stage. And in asking what that meant, it was no other Black people audition, so we really can't put you on the stage. And if we do, you have to be in the capacity of a friend. You can't be a family member if that family is predominantly white and things like that. So I heard that a lot. I remember my first review that came out in Citizen Times, and actually the reviewer said, imagine, if you will, that a Black woman could be the head mistress of an all-girls school in 1920. There's a striking new face on the stage, but only talked about the interracial relationship in the play, which was not written in the play. It was only because I was Black, and to talk about my race more than my talent or anything like that. So that's always disappointing. So if we look back at those times and we look back at now, how much has changed?
Oh, so much. And not all, I won't sit here and say everything has been so great and good. You just only see the surface, but that's the part of getting to where you're at now. I remember going to, then I would go to like coffee shops or places, and you put in applications or try to apply to get your works in different places. And I was putting my image, I was putting my picture along with my artwork. So they were just passing it by. Oh, we like the way you look, but no focus on the art. The first time I set out my art without my face, that's when I was called in for interviews. So I wanted people that had me to think, oh, so you're looking at this person behind it, but not the art. So you had to kind of change it a little bit, put a little spin on it, and it worked. So, but still today, it's still, I'm considered, I think a lot, when you hear the name Jenny Pickens, you think of the Black Lives Matter. So, and it's more to me than Black Lives Matter. That wasn't my first time ever doing any art. It wasn't my first, I've been doing it all my life. It just took something like that to happen before you reckon, oh, so that's who that person is.
Micah, you left Asheville for a while. You went to Philadelphia.
I did.
Why did you leave? Was it artistic? Not any personal reasons, but if
Right.
it had to do with your artistic.
Well,
career.
for me, it definitely was, I wasn't being seen. I was definitely a member of the community. I put myself out there constantly. That's just my nature. The part that made me go, I want to see something different, I want to see how it's done, made me go to Philadelphia and see the art scene there. It definitely taught me the good fight, Philadelphia, of fighting for what I wanted. So when I came back here, like I said, the scene itself was something that was unfamiliar to me. It became more unfamiliar to me. There was way more galleries, there was way more artists, but I was looking for local, I was looking for Black, I was looking for any person of color. And I want to mirror the same conversation that Jenny just had. When I first started my career here, I went to the Blue Spiral, because you always want to start at the top. And I went in there and I was just like, let me see your photography. And at that time, the director was like, there is no photography here. We don't serve those clients. And I was like, wow, okay, well, thank you for the seed. I will be back. Went away, did my thing. Definitely, like I said, being a part of the community was a central role for me. Coming back and seeing and being who I was, it was very, very honoring to be seen by one of the curators at the Blue Spiral. And they finally said, it's time for you to be in here. So coming back is definitely, I want to see way more artists of color out there supported, out there just mentored, out there just showing their work and living their lives. So
That's awesome. Awesome. Thank you. Sekou, can you talk a little bit about your work with Southside Rising and now as the executive director of Asheville Writers in the Schools?
Sure. So the work that has been taking place in both spaces has really been about community engagement and using creative placemaking as a strategy for getting residents in these communities that have been pushed to the margin to be more engaged, first and foremost, in their own outcomes in terms of where they live, but then also into having more productive, or rather healthy outcomes with respect to the social determinants of health, right? So Southside Rising began as an attempt to celebrate the history and the culture of Asheville's Southside neighborhood, which is a historically Black community, lots of very rich heritage and culture. Many times when Black artists would come in the earlier periods in the 50s and 60s and 70s, the Chitlin Circuit had stops in Southside, and they would play. I know, Jenny, you know about some of these places. Aretha Franklin would come through, James Brown would come through. There was places where they would go into Southside. Now, a lot of people tend to think of Southside as River Arts District, or South Slope, or South French Broad. But all of those regions were part of what was originally this historically Black neighborhood. And so one of the strategies that we looked to implement through Southside Rising was a way to bring back Black faces into the performing arts. And so this took place a couple of years ago with a performance called Black Nativity, which was inspired by Langston Hughes' play. But it was really several steps beyond that, because it wasn't an actual play itself as much as it was a collection of performances. So we had spoken word, we had dance, we had visual art. During a couple of our performances, Jenny was there actually live painting inspired by what was going on stage. And the great thing about it was we did, if I'm remembering correctly, we did 6 or 7 shows in 5 locations over 8 days. So we started at the Eddington Center, which was at one time the Livingston Street School, when it was segregated education here in Asheville. So we started at the Eddington Center with 2 shows there. We did a performance at Stevens Lee. We did a performance at the Burton Street Recreation Center. We did a performance at Asheville Community Theater, and then we did our finale at the YMI Cultural Center. And each night was a different performance. Not necessarily a different performance, it's the same performers and the same performance, but because each night was an opportunity to really embrace that particular space, the performance kind of morphed each time. I was there for every single one, and I saw something different each time. So that was great. It was great, the sense of bonding and camaraderie that established between the cast and the members of the cast throughout the whole time. And it was great to see people celebrating Black performers and Black artists on stage in spaces where Black faces, by what you all were just saying, had not been seen in any real frequency. And so that was a really, really powerful thing. And to show people that there are Black performers, there are Black artists, there are Black creatives in this space. And that is really consistent with the work of Asheville Writers in the Schools and Community, because our work is really about igniting social change through the power of arts, culture, and restorative self-expression. So people know a lot about our teen program, Word on the Street, which provides opportunities for Black and Brown youth to come together using art as a tool for collective liberation. But we also do literary programs such as the Family Voices program, which works with elementary school youth. And then we do great things where we've provided opportunities for artists of color, including Jenny and Micah, to work in community settings, to teach their art and to show little Black kids that there are people who look like you who are doing this art. Because is also this narrative in specifically in communities of color around the arts as sort of a luxury. Right, I'm sure Micah, Jenny, you probably heard from family, Stephanie, and your family. Well, that's nice, but when you gonna get a real job?
Right.
And so, what are you doing these days to support yourself? And being able to bring in artists of color who are actually legitimately working and getting paid and forging careers and paths and lives for themselves with their art, that provides a counter narrative for young Black and brown kids to see, no, I can be a visual artist, I can be a photographer, I can be a videographer, I can do these things. And I can tell my own stories. I don't have to tell the stories of some dusty old white person that has been told for hundreds of years. I can talk about what's going on in my community, what's going on in my family. I can amplify and elevate narratives that my grandmother, that my abuelita, that my family told me and still tells to this day, and I can make it beautiful. So that's what, when I look at equity, that's what I think about.
I love that you're talking about what you're doing with our youth, because it's really important, as you say, for them to see that representation matters. As you work with them, what is your long-term goal? What would you like to see them go on to do once they've aged out of your program?
So I mention this a lot. I grew up in DC, and I grew up in DC during the Barry years. And so, at that time it was Chocolate City. And you had Black doctors and judges and lawyers and mayors and architects and accountants and everything. So for me, there was never a question of not being able to do something, because the people who lived in my neighborhood, the people who lived around me were doing it. And so what I really would like to be able to see happen is a space where young kids of color can see potential and opportunity here in Asheville. When you talk to a lot of teens specifically, one of the things they can't wait to do is leave. They can't wait to get out of Asheville and go to Charlotte or Greensboro or Atlanta or New York or LA, because they don't feel that there's anything here for them. So what we have been working to do is to try and counter that narrative and try and create not only opportunities for them here while they're here, but opportunities for them to return to go to school or college, gain knowledge, and come back and bring it here, because they have an opportunity to be the artistic director at a community theater. They have the opportunity to be a lighting technician. They have the opportunity to be a working photographer or videographer. So we're looking to expose them to these opportunities, give them the understanding that there is a social enterprise, there's an entrepreneurial aspect about that, and then ignite a passion and a fire and cultivate a love of the arts in doing it in a way that represents what their lived narrative, lived experience has been. So finding ways to make that a sustainable, ongoing kind of thing, that is where the work is. But the goal is to have a space where you can start as a middle school kid in some sort of arts program, and that there's a pathway, there's a pipeline, if you will, that can take you all the way through your years when you graduate. And then you've got this experience that can help you to get a college education, learning certain things, and then you can come back and bring that skill back and grow and build and seed that soil for the future generation.
Is Asheville ready for that kind of pipeline or program?
I would like to believe that it is. We definitely know that there are individuals in the community that would like to see these things happen. There are Black children, there are brown children who want to be actors, who want to be visual artists, they want to be singers, they want to be dancers, they want to be performers. They think, because of what I was saying before, that's not a realistic outcome for them. And so they don't really put a lot of energy into it. Sports is often the narrative, and that's where everybody goes. Meanwhile, you probably have just as much chance of being a successful performing artist as you do as being a successful athlete. And just like in the athletic industry and professional, there's so many things that are adjacent to being a professional athlete that you can do. You could be a trainer, you could be, I mean, they're just in walking onto this stage today, there are people behind the scenes controlling the lights, they're on headsets or whatever. These people who have jobs, you know, and they don't look like the people from a lot of the communities that we're working in. So there obviously are jobs and opportunities here. Is Asheville ready to make space and create those jobs and opportunities for people who look like me? Well, that's a completely different conversation. And is Asheville ready to put the money towards supporting those kinds of things and creating this pipeline, if you will? I think that I would like to think that there are people that are willing to do it, or, you know, as the saying goes, and put your money where your mouth is. And it's going to take resources, financial and otherwise, to create these sustainable pipelines. But the individuals are in place to make it work. And if the other individuals are in place to support it coming to be, then I think that we can see something very viable and tangible within, you know, a 3 to 5 year period.
What can we do as a community to help that pipeline get populated and to keep it moving?
I think, and I don't want to take up the whole, I'm mindful of my voice taking up so much space here. But I know just in the last couple of years alone, some of the things that are helpful, in addition to supporting creatives like yourself and Micah and Jenny, so that they can display their works in more highly trafficked venues, is also supporting venues that are being developed and operated by people of color. Noor Collective, right around the corner. They just celebrated their 1 year anniversary. You know, amplifying that profile. What the things that Different Strokes is doing. How can that be amplified so that, you know, the season passes for the Different Strokes offerings is just as viable as season passes for NC Stage or for the Wortham Center. And then what does it look like to support summer programs that take place, you know, in community centers, in community settings? My daughter, who has worked with the Tanglewood summer camp since she was 14 now, she just graduated from college earlier this year. It's been a great experience and a great asset to their program. And at the same time, it would be great to see theater programs like that in Shiloh, in Burton Street, in Southside, in Hillcrest. So I think that there's definitely the need to put these faces out there. What can be done is identifying the individuals who are already working to make those things happen, and figuring out how to help them, asking them, what do you need? What resources do you need? What connections do you need? What support do you need to be more successful and to better serve the people in your community?
Thank you. Would either of you like to comment on that, Jenny? I think that's a big conversation.
I think having more conversations with people, like actually sitting down and stop assuming something and having these misconceptions or these, I guess, stereotypes of how Black people are, because our skin colors is beyond that. And having a conversation, like you meet somebody and it's like, oh, well, I didn't know that about you, because you never had the conversation. So there's a lot going on in our community. Like you say, Noir Collective, AVL, which is, I don't know any other gallery. Let's just say this. All the places I've been at here in Asheville, all the places I've displayed my artwork, I showed up in that place a year ago. The first night they had their opening, I sold the painting. That's never happened to me. I've been selling, and I've been there a year now. I even worked there a little bit, and I've sold paintings because when people come into that space, it's Black entrepreneurs, it's Black business people, it's all Black owned, everything is Black. So you know when you're walking in there, you're supporting someone Black, and they're local Black artists, at least 13 or more. So, and I'm there on Fridays. I'm looking at this traffic that's on the other adjacent street back and forth, but why isn't anybody coming on that side? So what makes us any different than that other side? So if someone comes in our store looking for a specific item or a specific place to eat, I'll send them on to that other side. But are you sending them to our side? Are you telling these tourists that we're over there? Because I'm working in there on Fridays, I don't see it. If they're leaving the hotel and going to the coffee shop, I see them. And the first thing I'm asked, where's all the Black people?
We
There's not
tend
a-
to hear that a lot, don't we?
There's
We're all
a-
the Black people, but we're here.
Yes, we're here, we're here.
And how or what is the best way, do y'all think? Because we talk a lot about where are all the Black people. I've said that when I first got here, I said that a lot and have said it recently. But then to come to find out, Black people are everywhere, artists,
Yes.
or all over the place in Asheville in particular. We're in little pockets, but we're still here. So what can we do, or what do we need to do so that we bring the Black artists, Black and brown artists more out into the visibility of this community? What can we do to do that?
Like you were saying, with just support of somebody's full potential, it took an artist as I was a child in order to inspire me. So that's why I think, and I love working with Sekou in inspiring the youth. It takes inspiration, it takes support. Obviously, you have to have talent, but in order to nurture all of that, I think a lot of things need to be put in place for that to happen. Like I said, putting centers in these places where centers are never at. I didn't know about so many opportunities because they weren't given to me or put in my face to this day. Even when it came to me being on this panel, I learned a new word, honorarium. Laugh, but I went, I'm 45 and I just learned a new word. So I want the youth to be able to recognize what's put in place for them to be able to succeed in this life. So that's what I think.
You know, there was, happened last summer, but there is a Black playwright in town who I'm actually talking to so that we can see what we can work out in as much as getting a play written about Black people by a Black person. But she said when she took her play to this theater company in town to have it done, she specifically asked for a Black director. Okay, let's back up. Stephanie has been running Different Strokes now for 11 years, and I have directed about 80% of those plays that we've done. She was told that they didn't know of a Black director, that there were no Black directors in town. So things like that matter too. It's if you have the information, pass it on. It has to stop being this territorial thing, because if we're going to widen the arts for all of us and for equity for all of us, we've got to put the information out there. So granted, they wanted to direct the play themselves, but they were not asked if they wanted to direct it. They were asked, do you know a Black director who could direct this play? But visibility matters, and sometimes that visibility is right out in the open, but we keep it shuttered because we think that it's not good enough or as good as what the dominant culture is producing. What are some long-term strategies to improve racial equity in the local arts sector? I want y'all to think about that too and use your little computers, gadgets, whatever you have out there to kind of consider that question. But Lisa, I'm going to ask you.
Sure, yeah. I think, so I moved to Asheville in 2008, and I've been fortunate enough to kind of get a little window into that question. You said, where are all the Black people, or what's the history of Asheville? And in my experience, there's such a rich arts and cultural history here. And for every Jenny Pickens, there's 10 more, 20 more, because you're a product of this community, you're not an anomaly. And so I found that, there's Goombay, there used to be the drama program at what was formerly called the Reed Center. Of course, there's Black Mountain College, the Hillcrest High Steppers, Asheville Sunday Best was a gospel singing competition that Shanika Smith organized. Of course, the history of the drum circle, from my understanding, it wasn't always an all-white space. There's a lot of Black drummers in this community. So I just think about, we have everything that we need in this community, and looking at that pipeline from emerging artists to mid-career to established artists, that's all here. It just needs to be resourced. It needs to be acknowledged. I think the history, that bringing that visibility so that people know and understand that history, that it's here. We don't have to recreate anything. We just have to learn from what came before, and also learn why did it go away, and not make those same mistakes and repeat those same patterns.
Awesome. Anybody else?
I think that with the intersectionality that's threaded into a lot of the mindsets of people here, I think that also has to be addressed in order to, bring forth all these ideas that, just how we live. Like you said, it doesn't matter where we live. We are talented and we're in these pockets, but we have to be found, and we have to know that there's information out there.
Yes. When I'll go back to We See You White America. When that was initially introduced, we had a whole lot of organizations step forward and say, we've been complicit in exclusionary practices. We have not honored Black and brown people. We strive to do better. A whole lot of publications about that, people putting statements on their websites and so forth and so on. So now here we are, almost 2 years later. And do we see any of those statements coming to fruition?
Are we still having this talk?
Not really. Like you say, I've said before, Black History Month, they're coming out the woodwork. I want you here. Can you come do this, please? This. I mean, so many things going back. You're like, which one am I gonna? 2 months after that? What in? I'm looking for what you wanted me up February for the 28 days. Where are you now? So it's like, and then with the Black Lives Matter, let me get this one too. You'll see these signs in yards, you see these signs on businesses, Black Lives Matter. It's basically saying, please don't tear up my stuff. You could care less. I mean, there are some who are really genuine, but then there are some, because I've been here a long time and I know the fakers, that just don't destroy my stuff. We got you, but you go in the store, they're following you around.
So yeah, there are a lot of people who are legitimate and there are a lot of people who are not legitimate. So what I hear a lot is, yeah, but we believe that we want more equity in our organization. We would like to have more Black people on our board, more brown people on our board, or whatever, but what can we do is basically what I'm hearing. What can we do? What do we have the power to do? Black people don't want to be on our board. They don't want to come work with our organization. So what do we have the power to do? I mean, what's the answer to that?
It's trust issues, because you've done this before and you never kept your word. So why am I going to keep doing that again? You got to put it out and say you're going to do something and stick with it. Just like you go in, companies have meetings and we're going to do this, they leave and go have lunch and forget all about what the meeting's about. Nobody's even thinking about it. So you gotta, if you're gonna put it down, what you say, put your money where your mouth is, all of that, and just own up to it. Be accountable for what you're saying.
How about going out into the community and stop waiting for Black and brown people to come to you?
Exactly.
There's something to be said for doing the legwork and going out and building relationships.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think it's important to build the relationships, and I think that the relationships need to be built in an authentic way. There are a lot of people, specifically here in Asheville, but Asheville is not, exclusive to this phenomenon. There are a lot of people who don't understand the difference between transactional relationships and transformational relationships. So there are a lot of people, particularly white-led organizations and individuals, who want to enter into relationships with artists of color, communities of color, but they're doing it because of what it does for them. So that I can say, you know, I'm volunteering X number of hours with this, you know, Black youth organization, or I made this contribution to this, that, or the other. Where's the opportunity for transformation in me? You know, if you are creating an experience or creating an opportunity where there are organizations, under-resourced organizations and individuals that you are supporting with time or resources in a transactional fashion, they're still going to be needing that kind of support for the long term. If you, on the other hand, seek to enter into a transformational relationship with them and look at, okay, so why are you doing the work that you're doing? What is that work in response to? What are the root causes of the need for that work? How can I address those things? It might be, sure, I can give $5,000 to you and your organization for the work that you're doing, and I will. And at the same time, I can go talk to my father-in-law who operates this entity that's causing this harm in this community, and I can do much more. And that becomes a transformational thing. I might be able to come and volunteer and help do some reading for some young people, or I can create job opportunities at my organization. I can create a scholarship program. I can create an opportunity for internship or apprenticeship so people can learn what I'm doing in this field and this work. I think, you know, a lot of people need to do their own work internally. You know, race is such a messy topic, an issue here in this country, and continues to be. And so until people, and specifically white people, can really look within themselves and do their own work, and figure out why equity is important to them. There might be some people that say, you know, equity is not important to me. You know, I get it, you know. I don't know how we can work together, but it's real for some people. But for equity to really, really be about, for equity to really, really exist, there needs to be more emphasis on transformational relationships and less on the transactional side.
So I'm hearing too, there's a difference between questions, what can be done in the long term and what can be done in the short term.
Right.
So kind of putting your money where your mouth is right now. Putting your time and energy is right now. Making long-term donations and setting up foundations is in the long term. So
I think that's important because particularly through the arts, but not just exclusively limited to the arts, when you look at the contributions historically of Black and brown communities to the arts and to American business, you know, for generations that's been stolen labor. You know, so and this is not, I know very little about the history of the Wortham Center itself, but just in the notion of a performing arts facility and the history of performing arts and how buildings such as these get built and funded and supported. And at the same time, when you've got shows that, you know, in many cases were written or inspired by Black people, when you've got music that developed out of Black musical styles, when you've got stories that were lifted from the Black experience and whitewashed and changed around or whatever, you know, there's these resources that can support things in the now were in many times developed or accumulated because of the labor or intellectual contributions of Black and brown people. And so in many ways, it's almost kind of like a method of reparations and recognizing, okay, well, I'm here at this space because of standing on the shoulders and backs and necks of people who were not being recognized. So how can I honor those contributions and sacrifices while also creating space in the future so that those kind of things don't happen?
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Lisa, what's been your experience working with up and coming artists at UNCA?
So I teach at UNC Asheville, which is a predominantly white institution. And then even within the university, the students that choose to major in the arts, it's even smaller percentage of BIPOC students. So most of the students that we have that graduate and stick around identify as more part of the LGBTQIA+ community. And I think, well, for a lot of college students or young folks in general, and back to what Sekou said about people wanting to leave or there's not a lot of opportunity, like I think there's sort of the entry level, especially in the service economy, but then, you know, after 2 to 3 years, that kind of gets old very quickly and you reach sort of an economic ceiling and there's not a lot of opportunities for folks to do much beyond that. So we do have some graduates who do get involved and are continued to be a part of the local arts community, and also creating their own, like drag performance has become a big thing, especially with the tourism in Asheville. And so we've had several students who have been able to, from an entrepreneurial aspect, create some income stream through that. But yeah, it's very hard for folks to stick around.
So what should our next steps be to bring about more equity and inclusion in the arts in Asheville? What should our next steps be? We've talked about long-term goals, we've talked about short-term goals, but today, what can today and tomorrow consist of that are going to start to make a change?
I think one of the ways that folks can start, particularly those here in the audience to whom this applies, if you're unfamiliar, well, first of all, if you're unfamiliar with any of the panelists and the work that we do, take the opportunity to get more familiar with us and our work and our organizations. Figure out how you can support what we're doing. Jenny creates fabulous work, and her art is available and on display in many places. Micah is a phenomenal photographer and visual artist, and so there are opportunities to support them. The nonprofit that I'm the director for, we just launched our annual fundraising campaign, which is on through the end of the year. There are lots of opportunities right now to become more familiar with the work that's being done and ways to support that in the immediate space. I think the other thing that could be done is making a commitment to be a more long-term partner in work for equity in the arts. If you're here at this panel, that means at some level it's of interest to you. And so if you want to see improvement and movement on this issue, then in addition to familiarizing yourself with those of us that you may not be familiar with, make a commitment today to figure out, okay, I'm going to prioritize learning. I'm going to prioritize supporting. I'm going to prioritize contributing. I'm going to prioritize nurturing. There's all sorts of ways that can be done, all sorts of things that can be done, but there's no one size fits all. And I think that's kind of the fallacy, the problem with our society at this point, with so much at our disposal, you know, click to do this, swipe to do that. People don't want to wait for anything anymore. Mm-hmm. You got to put in the work. You just got to get up and sweat it out and grind it out and notice that, okay, well, I'm not going to see anything today, but I did it today. And I know that when I look back at it in 2 or 3 weeks and 2 or 3 months and 2 or 3 years, I'm going to see how much progress I made day to day to day, even if I'm not getting an award or an accolade or kudos for what I'm doing today. So yes, there's stuff you can do today, educate yourself, but then also make the commitment to say, I'm going to do more than just something today. I'm going to make this a long-term thing.
Like that. Lisa, you have any thoughts?
So first of all, like Micah said, pay people. That's to me a no-brainer, even if it's an honorarium or something, just acknowledging them that they have value. And believe people when they tell you that they've been harmed by your organization. And sometimes that's really hard to sit with, even if you're a leader of the organization who was not there when the harm happened. But I feel like it's really important to believe people when they say harm was done. And then shifting the culture, which for white folks and folks of the global minority, being able to figure out that your internal work that you have to do and being willing to kind of put your big girl, big pants on, big girl, big boy pants on and do that work. And there's a lot of organizations in town locally that are helping white folks do our work. So we don't have to continue to recreate harm or expect unnecessary emotional labor from our BIPOC colleagues. And then building what comes next. You know, I appreciate the phrase anti-racism because it says that you have to actually do something to stop racism from happening, that's an action to be anti. But sometimes if we focus so much on what not to do, we're not asking ourselves, what is it that we do need to do? And so personally for me, if folks are familiar with the characteristics of white supremacy culture, Tema Okan is the person who kind of pulled some of that work together and credits lots of folks in the development of it. But one of the practices I started over the pandemic was just reading that document because it names what white supremacy culture looks like, and it also provides an antidote. So it tells you what you should be doing, you know, in creating cultures of appreciation. How do we learn from mistakes, changing the blame culture, all of those things that are not serving white folks either. And, you know, just picking one thing that you can do and focus on and, you know, not waiting if you're a predominantly white organization, not waiting for the token person of color to come and, you know, lead the way and tell you what it is that you need to do, identifying the work that you need to do and start doing it.
Micah, how about you?
Again, if you're here or if you're watching live, I would like to pose, not even pose, just you have to become more so of a role model in your neighborhood for your people in order for them to see. That's what I'm not seeing a lot of. I'm seeing a lot of people that want to help, but you're also going to be a branch to so many other people that I can't reach. And even with all this talk, I love talking, but talking is not going to get us where we need to be. And even with studies that are out there right now that show with Black artists, we are less than 2% within museums. And when I heard that, that really put a fire in me to see if I could be one of those artists that, you know, excels to that level one day. But it definitely comes from support from you guys. I've lived on this planet for a long time now, and it's definitely one of those beautiful things to see and be supported by people not of your color. So just being a role model in your sense of whatever that means, just to help. So that's what I think for that. Yeah.
How about you, Jenny?
My thing is investing in our youth, our younger kids. I do after school programs, and it just the art and them having a safe place to go to and being creative and releasing some of that tension, because I think we tend to forget we were once kids. We forget that kids are dealing with things just as much as we are, and they act out. So I think having more arts and music and performances with our youth and investing in these programs will help them a lot as well.
For me, it's conversation. I think a lot of decisions are made when we are not in the room. For me, it would serve me a lot better if you talk to me or the folks up here about thoughts that you may have or plans that you're making. And you just see how we feel about that, especially because it concerns us. So conversation, being willing to ask what we need, what we want or how you can help. The conversation for me is everything. I think conversations mean a lot. Katie, I don't know where we go from here. You said there are questions? Okay.
If you see me looking at my phone today, I am not checking my email. I am moderating your questions. So we've had several come in for you guys. If we could bring the screen back up. All right, here's your first question, guys. Some of the efforts to support and promote BIPOC artists feel performative, like a quick reaction to the events of last year. How do we move into a more authentic way of being? Somebody want to start?
Well, if you're having that question, you've already started that process. So just continue with that process. Again, we're talking about it. We're not walking about it. Show me better than you can tell me. That's what I would like to say this.
So the next question, and this is more of a statement, but right on. We need to incorporate art into the city's reparations agenda. Corporations and developers should pay a tax to support BIPOC artists and education initiatives, well-funded liberation. From your perspectives, what factors in this region inhibit Black and Brown artists from creating opportunities to thrive, forming arts organizations, developing productions or galleries, etc.?
I think one of those things is visibility. One of the key things is visibility, just not seeing anything like that here in Asheville. With there not being a history of having a Black repertory theater, with there not being a history of these kinds of things that young people can perform in when they're kids and then grow up to be leaders of when they are adults and have their kids in them and so forth. There were those things. They were. You know, those the Hillcrest High Steppers. There were plenty of other opportunities. And they've not gotten the kind of support. I think it's also, you know, a lot of emphasis is put on the dominant narrative, reinforcing those things that we kind of see all around us. And I've made a comment before that if you're not a person of color, you have to, in many spaces, work very hard to see things in the dominant narrative that reinforce your lived experience. Whereas if you aren't a person of color, you don't have to work hard at all to see things that reinforce your lived experience, from the news to TV to music and so forth. So what really needs to be done is when there are shows and performances and exhibits and opportunities to support Black artists, that it's not just the Black community that is supporting them, and that there can be incentives and incubators for different kinds of festivals and events that can not only support the artists that are here, but invite artists outside of the area, outside of the region to the space. People come from all over the world to Asheville. It's in the list of top 5 fill in the blank every other day. You know, how do you get Asheville to be top 5 destinations for young Black creatives? Like how do you get that list and that position on a list? I think answering that question is the answer to the other question.
Yeah, I think you have to have a certain amount of privilege just to get a business started. Like one of the things we've talked about is how many of our youth are leaving town after high school or college. They're not working here in the community. They're not doing their art here. They're going to other communities to do their art because it is so difficult to get your foot in the door. So that's something that we've talked about, you know, with the pipeline process and everything, is how do we help youth get their foot in the door, as well as, you know, those that are more established or would like, you know, are older and have done the work for a longer time and would like to do it professionally. Anybody else want to tackle that question before I move on? Okay. Any advice on diversifying performance and arts experiences in rural communities? Well, this is a perfect follow-up question. That may have smaller populations, local resources for finding artists and performers. So as well as, you know, as Sekou mentioned, bringing rural artists into Asheville so that they have more exposure. What about having more artists, you know, from the Asheville, since we are the hub, the arts hub here in the Western region, out to these rural communities?
Well, you know, I hear that and I think immediately of some sort of scholarship or fellowship sort of program. I know that they have these kinds of things in the environmental community where a student, a college student, for example, who might be pursuing environmental studies at the collegiate level is able to get some sort of scholarship or grant or fellowship where they can then go and work in a rural location or off the grid. Their necessities are taken care of for them in the form of a stipend or something like that. So they don't have to, their job is basically being in that space and providing what they can to that space. What would it then look like to have for students, whether they're at UNC Asheville or whether they're at North Carolina A&T or any other HBCU, to say, if you agree to live in this space for a year and perform in these performances and to work within the community and do these other sorts of things, then your daily needs will be taken care of in the form of stipend and a place to live or whatever. I think that would be a really interesting opportunity for cultural exchange to bring students from urban environments, from city environments to rural environments or to, you know, we think of Asheville as a city, but in many cases, Asheville's a rural. You know, you go 5-10 minutes in any direction and, you know, you are reminded of that. So, you know, it could be just as much of a benefit for places like Asheville as it could be for Barnesville, for Flat Rock, for other cities and counties in the Western North Carolina region. So I think something like that is an example of, you know, a kind of opportunity that can say, hey, if you really want to perform, we'll take care of everything else for you. You just go do this and pursue your craft and develop your craft in this space.
Yeah. Anybody else?
I'm going to go back to economics and say, looking at how you can put artists on the payroll, and this is more for non-art sectors, so like city government organizations, and there's models out there looking at it of how do you just fund artists, knowing that inherently artists, they're not just going to create their work, but they're going to transform your organization. I mean, I love that, distinguishing the difference between transactional and transformational, because as artists, that's what we do. We specialize in transforming materials, transforming ourselves. So coming up with innovative models to fund and sustain artists. I mean, there's, like I said, the McCarthy Genius Award, there's Creative Capital, there's lots of sort of funding models. And even locally, we have the Mandel Rodas Foundation that are, you know, doing a lot of really innovative philanthropy in terms of how they think about, instead of just funding project-based work, but funding individuals who have demonstrated that they are an asset to our community. And, you know, what would happen if they could just focus on doing the thing that they do best? The investment would yield tenfold what it is that they're doing. So I think that's, part of it.
As you all know, I've said that the arts councils play a real role in making connections, both here locally in our county, but also there is an organization called the Western Arts Agencies of North Carolina, which I'm the president of, and it's 23 counties in the western part of the state. and 21 Arts Council directors. And I think that is also a network that could be built for connecting artists across the region as well. So our next question is, looking at the mostly white audience today, what can we do to engage more people of color to participate and be leaders in the arts?
Have more welcoming spaces where you don't feel like you're the odd person when you walk into a room. I don't feel like that when I'm walking in one, but no, seriously, just, yeah, because you can go, I've been in restaurants here and you looked at like, or treated a certain way, make it more welcoming. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having a smile, making someone feel welcome. Because we don't get that all the time. I don't know, I'm speaking for myself.
No, even as a photographer, I would go to weddings and I would be taking pictures of these beautiful brides and grooms that hired me, that loved me. Then I would look on the peripheral of whoever, part of the family, and I could see in their eyes, I don't want you here.
Yes.
And I would still click the picture. But the inclusion of us just feeling normal walking in a room, that's something that it's subconscious, but it needs to be addressed as well. Because yes, plenty of times I've been the only Black person in a room taking pictures. But I'm so thankful for the people that do hire me. They don't see that, but
That's
I do see sometimes it's a little bit wider view for me, yeah.
I would say organizationally, hiring more people of color would be a huge step, because I know when I walk into a room, I also feel that. But what I do automatically is I count heads, because I want to see immediately who's got my back. So I look for people who look like me. I say, well, I got 2 over here, I got 3 over there, I'm good. So I think organizationally hiring more people of color helps, because it helps to normalize seeing people of color in situations. My company is a company in residence here at Wortham. So I'm eternally grateful for them for giving us that opportunity, and we perform in the Tina McGuire. But there have been many nights when we've had performances that people completely overlook me. I'll be standing out in the lobby to shake hands, to meet and greet, smooth a little bit before the show starts, and I get completely overlooked. And then when I take the stage to give the curtain speech, then it's like, oh, so normalizing that will help a lot, because if folks aren't used to seeing us, then they act like they've never seen us. So,
and I think it's interesting that, we're of a certain age and we're still having these conversations.
Isn't that something?
Okay.
Isn't that something?
So it's
Our
real.
grandparents are talking about the same stuff.
It's real for us. It's very real for us. So I'm appreciative again of just this conversation for all of us to have together in order to figure out what we do need to do.
I mean, it seems really simple, but sometimes it's hard just speaking to people.
Correct.
Even if you don't assume, like you said, who they are or not, just get into a practice of when you see someone, another human being, greet them. Hello, how are you? I mean, I know it's harder with masks, but I feel like that makes a huge difference. Like for me, once again, it's a personal practice of what that means. Like, oh, I'm going to hold the door open no matter who it is. I'm not going to assume that there's somebody important or not, like just, which I feel like white supremacy culture teaches us to create. We have this hierarchy of human value. So what does it mean to value everybody? And doing that internal work of our biases that place certain individuals above others.
I think having authentic relationships too, taking the time to build relationships so people feel connected to your organization as well. It is not a kind of a shallow invite. Any advice on diversifying performance and arts experience? Oh, I already answered that one. Sorry, y'all. With the launch of Black Wall Street at 8 River Arts Place in the River Arts District, what is being done by local government to support this initiative? Well, that might not be something that the panel can answer, but I don't know if you saw the city council meeting last week, where they approved to give a River Arts Place or rent it to Grind for $1 a year. I think that's fantastic. So for the next 4 years, their rent is $1 a year with an option to renew for 4 years. So that was an amazing way in which the city has recently stepped up.
Wow.
I like to see some of those businesses, those empty buildings downtown with the same initiative. That'd be great.
We got a lot of empty
A whole
buildings.
lot of them. Yeah.
I think, while this is not necessarily something that the city can, or that, local business government can do relative to that specific property in River Arts District, I think having an intent of supporting and cultivating a Black arts district or Black arts community, right? That can be huge. If there was city funds, if there were county funds allocated towards saying, we recognize that over this period of time, there's been the extraction and the exploitation of Black artists in this city. And this is an attempt, again, tie into the reparations conversation. This is an attempt to do right by that. And so we're looking to invest in and support Black arts initiatives in this particular way, in this space. So in the same way that they have things like opportunity zones where developers can get incentives and tax breaks for doing certain things in designated areas, what does it look like to incentivize low lease options for Black artists? So, you get this level of a discount if you're renting it out and you're a Black artist, or if you're doing these kinds of things. I mean, I'm just freestyling here, so I don't have it really fleshed out, but that kind of initiative, I first of all would find it hard to believe that there aren't other cities or places that have done similar kinds of things, right? So it's not about reinventing the wheel here, but I think it could also be a very viable option for cultivating in the long term, more creatives and artists of color, specifically within the Black community here in Asheville.
That'll definitely draw in more Black people coming into our area that wanna, yeah.
So the next question is talking about, Black populations in Atlanta, Greensboro, Charlotte are much larger. So is it a matter of attracting more Black people to move here to develop opportunities for Black artists? Is the question.
I think it's just, like I said, me leaving here was definitely part of not being seen. I wanted to see that scene. It's why I chose Philadelphia. I've been in Atlanta, but I wanted to see a different aspect on an artistic, thriving community. They support each other.
That's it.
Key. And then from that support, you do see, like I said, the branches that help support them. So it's constantly from, like you said, from housing to just food to everything in between. Yeah, artists need that help. And until we get to a place where we're sustaining ourselves, it's just, I love the idea of having, like you said, one of the fill in the blank, Black come here to artist type list we do need to be on. But I would love to, like I said, figure out how we get those artists here, because there's no enticing apple carrot right now. Nobody, me personally, I came back because I love the city and I want to see the city in a certain light. And it was very honorable, or it honored me to see when I came back that people were like, hey, we're glad you're back, let's do this. But it's definitely, it starts with support of each other and then support from outside sources.
I think it's the opposite of this question. I think that we've got to support what we have before we can attract what we want. And right now, we don't visibly support our artists of color. Different Strokes has a grant that we were awarded 2 years ago. So every year, we get a grant that we call the Honeybee Fund. and it is for us to hire and house actors of color. And my hope is that by bringing in other actors of color to do shows, that the future actors of color here will see folks who look like them doing it in order to jump out and do it. But I think we've got to first build this community before we can expect other people to join it. My mom used to always say, clean your house before you invite company over. I mean, that was a big thing. You had to clean the house top to bottom if anybody was coming. Stuff that we didn't normally clean on Saturdays got cleaned when we knew company was coming. So we've got to clean our house before we have other people over.
I definitely agree with that. And, you know, in Vogan's family sayings, my grandmother was fond of saying, you know, I'm gonna put the hay down where the goat can get at it, right? and the reality is, when we talk about what does it take to cultivate a culture, a scene, you know, Asheville is an incredibly expensive place to live for everybody. It doesn't matter the color of your skin. And I know anecdotally of cardiologists and neurosurgeons, Black, that were hired at places like Mission and left after a few years. They're getting paid by Mission, but there's nothing for it because they're coming from Atlanta, they're coming from LA, so they're used to being able to go and see Alvin Ailey or Dance Theater of Harlem or things like that. Like, where does that happen here? You know, there's so many great Black plays that it would be great to see in this space and spaces like this, but you don't see those opportunities happen. And when they do, they don't get supported. So yeah, you could have this big recruitment event to try and bring in people from Greensboro and Durham and Atlanta or whatever. But then when they get here, what are they gonna do if there are no jobs for them? If their children are going to schools and being faced with one of the biggest educational gaps in the entire state, if housing options for them put them so far away from the city that it's not really served by a robust public transportation system like Atlanta or New York or DC or whatever. So it's more than just, you know, waving a wand and saying, okay, we're just going to invite in these magical Negroes to make our place that much better. You know, it's like no, how do we create? It's like gardening. How do we plant what we want so that we can cultivate the crops that we need here in our own backyard? So.
And that's one of the reasons why I never left. I came to the conclusion, if I can't make it here in my hometown, I'm not gonna make it anywhere. I'm not gonna be a guest in my home. So you're not running me out of here. So, I mean, seriously, then you know, the younger kids that I work with, they're looking at me like, oh, you're really an artist, you can do, because you know, you're told when you're young that you have to be dead to sell a painting. I mean, really, you're not gonna be valued until you die. That's gonna do me no good. I can't buy any shoes in the casket. So, but yeah.
What was the best creative partnership or artistic experience you've had with a predominantly white organization, and what made it a good experience?
For me, I'm going to say it has to be Wortham Center for Performing Arts. I did not come to them, they came to me. And since we have been artists in residence here, we've got nothing but respect. We get included in their publications, on their website. They treat us like we're equal partners. And for me, that says a lot, because there have been times when we've been invited into other organizations and not been treated as well. We felt like we've been taken advantage of and tried to be folded into their thing and not respected for our individuality. So I really have to say it's worth it that they walk the talk and they are interested in seeing the community prosper and seeing arts equity for all of us. So I appreciate that.
I have to second that. Yeah, my experience has been good with Ray. So yeah.
I had a similar situation with Asheville Community Theater when working with the Black Nativity show. And just to know that, you know, that space for our show, that was our space. And they supported us in everything from, back of house to front of house. And they helped with the selling of tickets and getting the word out to their membership and their audience. They had, their staff available to run our tech for us. It was a really positive experience. And I'm happy to see that they're continuing to do that. I know that Maria Young has got a special fellowship with them where they're supporting Ria's work, which I think is fabulous. I think she's a phenomenal young playwright, and I'm happy to see what she's coming up with next and what that looks like. So that's what it has looked like. And not to be, dismissive or anything, but I'm happy with the relationship that has been developing with the Arts Council as well. And there have been some really wonderful things that have come out of it. So yeah.
Yeah, we're here right now.
I think we talk about Arts Council, we have to talk about Katie, because the Arts Council has not
Yes.
always been this way.
Yeah.
I was a member of the Arts Council pre-Katie, and it didn't give a rat's butt about equity and inclusion. But since Katie has come along, a lot of it has changed.
I'd like to,
That is
yes,
true.
I'd like to say the same thing for me personally. It's been the Arts Council. Beforehand, I was helped out, but it definitely means a lot when I came back that people like yourself reached out to me to be a part of this. So ACT, the Arts Council for me personally, yes.
So next question is addressed to the Arts Council. So I'm gonna take this one. Is the role of the Arts Council developing the arts locally to serve the economical value of the community, i.e. tourism, or to serve our residents, primarily students and local artists grow, thrive? And what I would say to that is, why does it have to be one or the other? The arts ecosystem has to act on multiple different levels if we're really going to make any impact. So the Arts Council is working on multiple different playing fields. Tourism, like it or not, is a very important part of the creative sector. We would not have nearly as many artists or arts organizations if it wasn't for the amount of tourists coming to our community. So we have to work on all of these playing fields. So quick question for Lisa. Can you give reference for the white supremacy document to educate white people?
Sure. So if you Google characteristics of white supremacy culture, there is a new website that, and like I said, Tema Okun, so TEMAOKUN, is spearheading that, but she gives credit to lots of other folks that are part of developing that work.
How do we change the perception of Asheville as a not good place for? I've heard this many times from artists of color who are not from Asheville. I think we kind of already covered that question. Okay. Like Stephanie implied, there needs to be more BIPOC in leadership roles. When people see people that look like them in leadership roles, it's inspiring and welcoming. That's more of a comment. Thank you. You're right. I think the other two that are left are both comments as well. So would everybody join me in giving a big round of applause for our first panel?